Welcome to Shift, people. We are so pumped that you're here. And if this is your first time here, you can scan this QR code or the one at the welcome table. If you scroll down the page and fill out the Connect card, we will send you a free Starbucks gift card. Small group signups are happening. We have in-person and online study groups, a dinner group, and a games group. You can scan the QR code or go to shiftgnv.com and click All Things Shift. Click the small groups link, choose all the options that you're interested in, and a group leader will contact you. You're gonna get tired of me saying this, but our first birthday is next month! Woohoo! We're celebrating our first year together on September 25th. It's gonna be a special service where we're all gonna be together, music, games, food, and there's gonna be a water bounce house for the kids. So make sure you mark your calendars and watch out for more information. Our next online-only service is gonna be September 4th, so there won't be anything here at the building. The teaching is gonna be on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page at 10:30 a.m. Next week's the end of this totally rad series, Summer Jams or whatever. So everyone's wearing their most bodacious 80s threads, or don't, like whatever. And we're gonna listen to some old guy named Tom Petty or something. I don't know, it's so stupid. Dad, this is so dumb. I'm supposed to be at the mall. Chad's waiting, or Chet. That's my pager, later. And that's all I've got, so let's jump into week 3 of Summer Jams. Still haven't found what I'm looking for.
I love that song. I can scarcely get through that without tearing up. As a kid, it hit me in all of the feels, and I didn't recognize why at the time. I just knew that it meant something. And then it was much older that I realized that this song is about this spiritual yearning, right? This deep dive for something more. And this is this is our week 3. We're diving into you two still haven't found what I'm looking for. If this is your first time, welcome. My name is Joe. I'm the lead pastor here, and we're in a series where we're wrapping up kind of our summer, and we've called it Summer Jams, and we're just walking through 4 awesome songs and the themes that are in those songs and how they resonate with us through time. That like this song is technically an 80s song, and yet it still feels incredibly relevant. Like it transcends like the 80s, right? This song was released in 1987 from, I think, maybe their best album, The Joshua Tree. So like this might be their best album from one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And this past week I learned that these guys all went to high school together, and the reason that they got together was the fact that one of them posted in their school bulletin board, like, I want to start a band. And those guys got together and formed U2 in 1976. They had their first record in 1980 and then just blew up. That's how U2 started, which to me is amazing. But the lyrics, right? Listen, I have climbed the highest mountains. I have run through the fields only to be with you. I have run, I've crawled, I've scaled these city walls only to be with you, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. So I have spent my entire life in the church. My entire life. Some of my earliest memories that I can recall are of this large church in Dallas and the bus that came to get me. I have served in 5 different, over 20 plus years, I have served in 5 different evangelical churches. I have been a youth pastor, I've been a family pastor, I've been a discipleship pastor, and I've been a lead pastor. I have quit the church only to come back. I have run, I have crawled, I have scaled these city walls only to be with you, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Do those words resonate with anybody else like they do with me? It speaks, like I said, I can't get through that song. It speaks of this constant search for more, for God. And the part that hits me like a ton of bricks every single time is that when he says that Like he's done all of these things and only to be with you, right? Like he's where he should be, right? Because he scaled the walls. He crawled through all this stuff only to be with you. And yet, he still hasn't found what he's looking for. All of those churches, all of those positions, all of those years, only to be with you. And I still haven't found what I'm looking for. You know, I was reading a passage this week in the account of Jesus' life written by, it's attributed to John. Church history tells us that John wrote the letter titled John. And in there, Jesus asks this same question to a couple of people. And it's found in John 1, and we're going to have it on the screen for you. And it says, the following day, John the Baptist, not the one who authored the letter, was again standing with two of his disciples. As Jesus walked by, John looked at him and declared, look, there's the Lamb of God. When John's two disciples heard this, they followed Jesus. Jesus looked around, saw them following. What are you looking for? He asked them. They replied, Rabbi, which means teacher, where are you staying? Come and see, he said. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they went with him to the place where he was staying, and they remained with him the rest of the day. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? And that's the question that I think that all of us are looking for, right? That's the question that we're all asking. Whether we're here in person or we're here on the stream, you are here specifically because you're searching for something. Like specifically this space. What it means to search for God, to follow God, what it means to follow Jesus, right? Something to do with faith, and that's the reason that we're all here, that we're all doing this thing together. And I love Jesus' response to what they were doing. Like, what are you looking for, right? He asks, what are you looking for? And they say, where are you staying? He doesn't tell them. He doesn't say, I'm staying at the Radisson Inn or the Holiday Inn or I'm staying. He says, come and see. There's no answer to that. It's an invitation, right? And so when I see this little passage here, I see two things that stand out to me just on a surface level. And the first is this. It's that invitation. It's the quest. It's the quest. Now, maybe I should have prefaced this at the very beginning. I'm going to get a drink because my mouth is dry. Because I'm going to be very real this morning. I want to share part of my story with all of you. Probably the hardest 5 to 10 years spiritually that I've ever had. And so I won't make broad sweeping statements because this is my experience. But I hope that it resonates with some of you and that you can connect with that and that we're kind of in the same space together. There's a buzzword that's going around church circles and has been for the last few years, and it's the word deconstruction. Now, it has become a suitcase term, but unfortunately, there are many church leaders and pastors that are using this word as a rallying cry to the faithful, right? They'll say things like that deconstruction is evil, it takes you away from God, that it will lead you astray. People who are deconstructing are doing it to excuse sin. They're doing it, these are direct quotes, this one. They are looking for street cred or to look cool. And to that, I humbly say, with all the love of Jesus in my heart, up yours. Because that's incredibly hurtful to me. I did not, hear me, I did not choose to deconstruct. It happened because I grew up, the teachings that I grew up with no longer held water. And I'm not putting this on anybody else, but my cotton candy, wishy-washy faith couldn't stand up to the experiences that I was having on a day-to-day basis. What I saw happen and what I had been taught weren't connecting. Those people who were supposed to be evil and selfish weren't. The way that I was taught to lead my family wasn't producing good fruit. The entire church staffing system almost ruined my marriage. We quit to save it. These things were happening in my life, And I couldn't reconcile what I was being taught with what I was experiencing. Then came 2015. And in 2015, I was going to say the church, then came the ugliness of the American church. And I don't think it just showed up. Like, it was there all along. Just 2015 began to expose a lot of the ugliness that was actually happening. We saw things like the Me Too movement that then cascaded into the church. And we saw all of these just horrible, abhorrent practices of the church. And now the SBC is under federal investigation for, which I say bravo, for all of the abuse that was taking place. Root all of that stuff out. And I don't care who they are, they all need to be held responsible. But then came the ugliness of the American church in 2015. I guess it was, just kind of exposed. It was the rampant racism, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia that was coming out. And I began to see a little bit of it in earlier than that. It was right after President Obama had been elected the first time. And it was the first time that I heard any of this stuff from a church leader. And I'll never forget it. We were driving to lunch. Some of us staff were going to lunch together. And the lead pastor was driving, and he said, "Hey, have you guys started buying ammo yet?" And I said, "No." "For?" We didn't live in a rural area, so it's not like we're going hunting or anything. It's not a common question. We served in a church up in rural Missouri where that was a common question. Like, "Did you get your ammo yet?" "On my way." Normal day, no big deal, right? But this was not, and I said, "No? Why do you ask?" Like, such an odd question. And he said, "Well, ammunition's going to be the new currency when the country falls apart." And I just remember looking over at, I was a student pastor there, and I looked over at the children's pastor. We were close friends, and I just kind of like slowly glanced at him like, "Did you just hear what I heard?" And he just kind of looked back at me. We didn't really move our heads much. We didn't know what was going to happen. But that was the first time that I started seeing a little bit of this that was creeping into the church. And then along came things like QAnon and the embracing of just these wild conspiracy theories. Now, what I'm not talking about is a healthy dose of distrust of our government. I think that's godly. I'm talking about these insane conspiracy theories that are driving people to wait in Dealey Plaza as if JFK is going to suddenly be resurrected again. And then it's like, right, we've all felt it. And then COVID happened, right? COVID happened in 2020. And again, feel how you want to about how the government handled it. I think there's some really bad stuff and some good stuff and everything in between. And I think we can be intellectually honest enough to admit that when one administration did good, they did good, and when they did bad, they did bad. Like, I think we can hold that intention, right? But I'm also old enough to remember that when much of the church was saying that COVID was the first step into socialism and communism, and that the government was going to strip us of all of and we would no longer be able to blah, 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 insert whatever, right? And yet, here we are, still gathering together under the banner of Jesus. And I remember much of the church, I say remember, it's not like it happened years ago, but much of the church embracing and continuing to embrace the worst leaders and excusing the worst behavior and all of the mental and spiritual gymnastics that it takes to do that. And I just couldn't understand why people would compromise Jesus to create some sort of Christian nation. You can't do that. We talked about that last week. Jesus didn't come to build a Christian nation. His kingdom isn't of earth, right? He said that standing before Pilate before he died. My kingdom is not of this earth. If it were so, my followers would be fighting for me. You can't have they don't go together. So when when all of that was like taking place, my wife and I had been going through a phase of deconstruction anyway, and all of that just accelerated it, right? Somebody just hit the gas, and we took off. And the more threads I pulled, the more things fell apart. And all of that culminated in this season of come and see, of Jesus inviting us on this quest of come and see. And it was an invitation. I don't care what anybody with a large platform says. It was Jesus that called us into this. All right? And we had to unravel all that was happening within us and the church to save our faith. So in 2020, there was a real crossroad for Tori and I. And it was, do we continue in the church? Period. Like not shift, just the church, the capital C church. Do we continue doing this? Because frankly, honestly, I was ashamed to carry the name Christian. Absolutely ashamed. For those that know, I also do training on the side. And during that time period, I had just started at Burn Boot Camp here in town. Well, it's not in town anymore. Dear. Pour one for the homies. Yes. But when I started, I made sure that nobody knew what I did outside of training. Because I didn't want any baggage coming between me and building friendships. Right? And I didn't want that. And I thought, man, there's something really wrong with that. And so we had a decision to make. Are we going to do this, or am I going to lean into the gym stuff and I'm just going to train? Because for us, we couldn't participate any longer in a system that embraced the rhetoric it was embracing the violence that it was, and the hypocrisy, honestly. People that we had been friends with for years, were suddenly saying things, saying horrible things, and it was like outside of their personality. It was just like, wait, I've known you for like 10 plus years, and where did that come from? And it just caused this real crisis in faith. And maybe you haven't had that crisis, or maybe you resonate with that, but I think all of you know exactly that feeling that I'm describing, that feeling of everything crumbling around you, right? That at times where everything feels like it's falling apart, or the rug is being pulled out from underneath you. There have been moments in my walk over the last several years where I've pulled on a thread, or I've dove into something, and it literally feels like physically my insides like just plummet. And I will literally, like, I would be sitting at my desk reading something, or I would be on a walk listening to one of my books or something, and they'll say a phrase, or they'll pull something apart, and it will feel like the world just collapsed, and I would have to like physically grab something to stop this feeling inside me, because it was literally, did I just waste 20 years of my life? Did I move my family halfway across the country? We're from Missouri, halfway across the country for something that's not true. That I dedicate myself to something that's a lie. And that's how I felt. So no, this feeling, this journey that we're on, this quest that I'm on isn't fun or sexy or cool. I didn't choose this quest. It chose me because of the terrible, horrible theology that was handed to me by my church. My parents, who, by the way, are going through this with us, didn't choose this quest. It was handed to them by this terrible theology, terrible teaching from our church. So when we relaunched Shift in September of 2021, like when we talked about it, prayed about it, like what do we want? We knew that we had to create a space for people like us. Because we knew it couldn't just be us. We couldn't just be the only ones going through all of this. And so we wanted to create a space for others that are doing the same. So this has to be a place where it is safe to ask any and every and all questions. No questions are off the table. We have to be able to have that here. We have to be a place where we don't have to agree on everything to have unity. Unity over uniformity. Uniformity is not, it doesn't have to, it can't happen. If I ask all of you anything about any particular subject, you're all going to see it differently. And that's okay. It has to be that way. There is a rich tradition in Christian history, in our faith, of disagreement and debate, and yet still being unified. Because unity isn't based on uniformity. If it is uniformity, I will tell you this, that then you're in a cult. If everybody believes the same thing, right? Or if the leader says it and you agree with it regardless of what I say, it's a cult. Run. Yeah. All right? If I can get away with the stuff that some of these pastors are getting away with and still be replatformed, it might be a cult. So our goal for Shift in this quest, our goal for Shift was to create a place in a community that our kids don't have to deconstruct from. I want them to grow up with a healthy faith in Jesus, right? So this quest, is it fun? It's actually horrible. Having to come to terms that everything I ever believed in, right? Just off. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not cool. It's necessary. So John records in that story just this really weird detail, that it was 4 in the afternoon and that he spent the rest, it's up there. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they went with him to the place where he was staying, and they remained with him the rest of the day. And it's so odd. Why? And I think it's because when you have a real encounter with Jesus, you remember when. My first real encounter with Jesus was October 12th, 1995. And I remember it because it was the summer after I graduated. I was just floating in life. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't in school. I was working at a shoe store. I was a shoe salesman. I was Al Bundy. If we're talking 80s, Google him. But for those that don't know who he is, I just shout out to millennials and Gen Z, younger millennials. But I was at the house of the girl I was dating at the time, and she lived outside of the city limits, and they had horses, so they had these huge fields. I don't remember, it was a Thursday. I don't remember why we were out, and I don't remember why I was out there late, but I was in the field, and I found myself completely alone. I don't remember where she was. But I do remember just walking through the fields. They had this tall grass, and it was a cool fall Midwestern night, and it was just the sound of the wind and the crickets keeping me company, and the light. There was no light pollution, so like you could see the Milky Way. And I remember looking into the vastness of the universe and feeling completely overwhelmed. And I can't describe it as anything other than God looking at me, and I crumbled, and I fell, and I just cried like a baby. Not unlike now. And I just wept, and here I am. I'm this 18, almost 19-year-old kid. I'm in the middle of this horse field, and I'm just bawling like a baby, and it was the first time I ever encountered the divine. And it changed me. October 12th, 1995. John knew the time of day. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because you don't forget when you meet Jesus for the first time. And so this begins the second part of it that stood out to me. John had his own quest, right? And Jesus is inviting us to ours, but he also had something that sustained him on the quest, and it's the same thing we need on our quest, and it's our constant. We have our quest, and we have our constant, and we need both. Our quest will take us all kinds of places, some good and some bad, but if we have our constant, we'll never lose our way, and for me, my constant is Jesus. It's Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I believe he is who he says he is. I believe that the path that he laid out for us is the best way to live life. That if we just follow the things that he called us to do, to live a certain way, to that narrow path of how we treat others, that golden rule, that it produces good fruit in our lives and the lives of other people. There are times, I'm going to be very honest, there are times where I don't believe in much of anything else. You ask me what I believe about prayer, there are days I don't know. What do you believe about God? I don't know. What do you believe about the afterlife? I don't know, but I believe in Jesus. It's my constant. And it was for John too. He never left Jesus. At the crucifixion, if you read the crucifixion, he is the only male disciple to be there. He and the group of female disciples are the only ones there. He's the lone guy that stayed. The rest of them bounced. Now, church tradition tells us that John penned this letter, the Gospel of John, that he also wrote 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and that he also wrote the book of Revelation while he was living out his days sentenced to a slave labor camp on the island of Patmos. Jesus was John's constant. One thing. His North Star. And it's mine too. And I think that's what Jesus is talking about here in this John 14:6. Like, it's really quoted. It's a famous passage, if you will. Like John 3:16, John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and this is Jesus talking. I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But let me tell you something. Let me shed some light on this. This is not the Christian membership card that we've been told, right? Like, I grew up, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one gets to the Father but through me. Like he's some bouncer at a Christian clubhouse, and if you're not old enough to get in, then Jesus is like, nope, you know. Jesus is the way that you take to get to God. When you start searching for the divine, you start searching for God, Jesus is that way, right? Jesus is the truth that we have to discern on that path to finding God. And Jesus is the way that we live life once we discern the truth and find God. It's not a church membership card. It's the way that we live life. It's the way that we do our quest. He's our constant. And here's what I've come to realize over these many years of this quest and this constant is it's one and the same. Jesus is the quest and the constant. He's all of it. And here's the thing, it never ends. This quest should never end. You should never reach a point in your faith journey where you're like, I did it. Man, that took a while, but I know everything about God now. You shouldn't, listen, if you ever get there or you ever hear somebody say it, it might be a cult, all right? Just run, all right? Just run. And here's the thing, the invitation for us this morning is this constant and this quest. And the hard part about it, you guys, the hard part about this quest is that so much of my quest is the temptation to demonize others. Is the temptation to demonize others. But if Jesus is my constant, man, then I have to understand that they're also on a quest. 10 years ago, Joe, 15 years ago, Joe, 20 years ago, Joe, and 45-year-old Joe, so 25 and 40, would not be friends. We would not get along. 25-year-old Joe was, he was very Christian nationalist. I can remember sitting and watching the shock and awe of the Second Iraq War and being like, praise God. We're going to do it. God's on our side. I remember watching it happen and thinking that. 45-year-old Joe would just weep for the death, for the carnage, for us choosing the wide path that leads to destruction. This is a constant journey. So let's not demonize others that are on their journey, and also let's hold space for grace for yourself as you're on that journey. As we know better, we do better. I've got a lot of things to make up for, but that's part of my quest, and I'm going to hold grace. I'm going to hold space for that. And we're going to hold space for that for other people. And this is why we wrote this on our website. If you go to shiftgnv.com and you scroll down, it says this: for so many of us questioners, the current church system hasn't and doesn't work. We have been told to be quiet, told to stop asking so many questions, or told that we need to find a new church. We're a community that engages searching, quest, that wants to learn how to ask better questions and loves tearing down walls of separation. For all of you that have been told you can't or don't belong, we are a church for the rest of us. So the invitation this morning is to the quest and the constant. So Mike's going to come back up, and he's going to start playing quietly. And I think that time of reflection is, where are you on that quest? Have you started the quest? And let's just be honest about that. And the invitation, honestly, for me is to Jesus, is to the constant. To me, it's the one thing. Like, we can have the discussion about his divinity or not divinity or all the things. Like I said, all questions are on the table. But I really, truly believe that if we follow the path that Jesus lays out for us, it is the best way to live life. And I believe he is who he says he is. I believe that because of what he did, the healing that he brought, that it healed not only humanity, but gives us the opportunity to participate in that healing of ourselves and others. That healing atonement. And so the invitation is open to all, right? The table of Jesus is open to all that are willing. And so I'm going to pray for us, and then anybody that's willing, you can take that communion that symbolizes the body and blood of Christ that was broken and the blood that was shed for the healing of humanity. But we don't stop there, because that's not the end of the quest. It's just the beginning. Like, then that propels us onto a more wholesome, a more healing quest, right? Because if Jesus did this for us, then what can we do for others? I have spoke with the tongue of angels. I have held the hand of the devil. It was warm in the night. It died. I was cold as a stone. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for.